Okay, we're live. So welcome back to another town hall. Let me share my screen, get some notes up here, and we will get started. Okay, just reorganize a bit here. All right, so I think Sarah's going to be joining us shortly, and I'll see if she can help with notes. Action items real quick, and I think given that we have sort of the core team here today, I think the plan is, if you all are willing, to sort of really focus most of our time today on that discussion of our Lumio voting process, since we keep running out of time on that. But we'll go through action items real quick. I need to resend. Oh, would somebody have something to say there?
Nope.
No, okay. I need to resend the chapter audit email. I didn't get to that yet, but I will try to prompt people to help fill out our form. I also need to figure out how to get logged into that e-NABLE matching platform. I did send an email to Thierry asking him if there's a special URL or how to get into that admin side. So I'm waiting to hear back from him. And gosh, I wonder if I should just take this off of our action items at this point. I know you certainly not been for lack of trying, Adam, but I don't think we've been able to pull together a leadership team meeting, have we?
We have not. I've also been on vacation for most of the last 2 weeks, so I haven't worked there in half a month.
Sure.
But
I guess I'll leave it for a while, but I don't know what else you could be doing. I'm not sure what else. Do you have any ideas there, John, about how to try to corral this team?
If conceivable that the burst of activity we hope to create around the Ukraine project will create an opportunity.
That's a good idea, yeah.
But I haven't thought it through.
a thought, we've sort of been trying to reach out to these folks collectively. I don't know what the driving force was behind selecting these members specifically. But I wanted to know maybe if reaching out to them individually, whether that's John or someone else, might be a better tack to try to get people on the same page, because as it stands, the sort of collectivist approach doesn't seem to be working.
Yeah, it's a good point. People just don't tend to deal with group emails. They figure somebody else will handle it.
I can certainly do that. I'm happy to do that, but I also have the impression that finding a common meeting time for these people who were selected in part because they're so busy and doing good work may be the real bottleneck.
Well, I guess that leads to the sort of subtext of what I was asking, is that are there other people who might be more available and more interested in stepping up and serving in a leadership capacity?
Well, those are the obvious candidates just because they are leaders. They have done important things, and
I just want to clarify, Adam, we haven't selected anybody. This is more a matter of identifying those that have stepped up and taken on things by themselves. We don't really have any authority here to say, hey, we want you to take on this role. But
well, I guess this is my question. You know, there are people who have done things, and that's I think, as John has stated, you know, e-NABLE being a duocracy is, I think, the key qualifier. But maybe it would be beneficial if we defined exactly what it is we want, the kinds of roles we hope people will be able to fill, and the kinds of activities we hope they'll be able to do.
Absolutely.
And if
it's something we've
people
struggled with. We've tried that in several ways at different times. There was a let's see, there's a pin post right on the hub where we have a very sort of poor attempt at, you know, defining volunteer needs. So it says here, volunteering needs, please check the volunteering needs hub space. So we actually set up a space for this, saying we need your help, and we started to list out some of these things here. We just never really fully developed this. This is not by any means current. So I like the idea, but somebody would need to kind of take the lead on defining and documenting that list of needs in a clear way. I've
Well,
got
maybe that would be a good subject for next week, if we don't have anything else really pressing. Would be to sort of open up the door to just give some time to ourselves to say, what were we hoping Safe would be able to do? What were we hoping Eric would be able to do? And then we can reach out to them individually and see if that's the kind of thing that they, actually are interested in doing.
Yeah, right.
And
right.
hopefully getting those people onto this call, or a similar call at some point.
Yeah.
But as it stands, I think one of the qualities that we need in someone who's taking on a leadership role is being present.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah, that's not a bad idea to sort of focus on that maybe for our next meeting. Let's just put that on the agenda and try to define our list of needs better, and we can
Perfect.
We can see what we can do from there. Welcome, Gary. Glad you could join us.
Thank you. Thank you. Good to be here. I'm here more as an observer than anything.
Well, you're
Although I
certainly,
am interested
certainly,
in anything to do with the Ukraine endeavor.
okay, great. Well, you're more than welcome. This is our weekly town hall where we just kind of do some problem solving and try to coordinate our activities a little bit. I'd love to have you just introduce yourself if you don't mind. Tell us a little bit about your background, where you are, how you found us, and what you're hoping to do with us.
Yeah, okay, Jeremy, thank you. I'm in Canada. I'm partway between Toronto and Ottawa area. And I got involved originally because I wanted to, actually, I was involved with an organization in Canada called Tetra Society, in which we made devices for people with disabilities, custom-made devices. And when I happened to come across the e-NABLE website and got very interested in it. And since that time now, I've actually just this morning, I got the okay for my first Phoenix 3 hand.
Oh, great.
Got my badge, so I'm underway. I got my my printer and learning how to use it, of course. And so that's about where I am. I'm particularly interested in trying originally trying to do something with the hands for the Ukrainians.
Okay.
But since that time, of course, the endeavor where we're making going to make the braces
Yep.
for hands and palms and so on. So that's about where I'm at, Jeremy.
Sounds good. Well, happy to have you here. And I'm actually going to make a quick adjustment on the agenda here because I do want to get, do we not have that Ukraine project in here yet? All right. I'm going to put that up here before we start talking about the Lumio stuff because I do want to get an update from John on that. So we'll talk about that and then get into the Lumio voting stuff. Let's see, I think we covered everything here in action items then. So on we go. I guess real quick, I'm not going to go through and have everyone do introductions here, Gary, just in the interest of time, but Rick is the one that you might have heard from on your submission for the Phoenix hand. He's reviewing those. He's also running our help desk and helping a lot behind the scenes. I myself.
Yeah, that's great. I've met Rick in the new members meeting a couple of times.
Great. Okay.
So nice to see you again, Rick.
Excellent.
How you doing?
John Schull, who you see walking there, and myself, we're both co-founders from years back, and we do whatever we can to support the community. Adam Jennings there is the A on your screen, and he's been really helping in a lot of key areas lately. He has both a medical professional background as well as a sort of a process engineering background. And so he's been really key to help us get our act together in a number of different areas, in particular working on coordinating help for Afghanistan. And
that's great. Yeah.
Sarah Gelbard is taking over the role that used to be handled by a gentleman named Ben Rubin, who's moved on to a full-time teaching position, which deals with media coordination, helping us to coordinate all these different groups that we have going in different meetings, and making sure that we're connecting the dots between what one group is doing and another, and that sort of thing. So she's been really key in helping to
Yeah, that's great. Well, I've also met Sarah, so thank you.
Excellent, excellent. So that's the team, and you're welcome
Yeah,
to
I
join
should
us.
say Gary has been
Go ahead,
Gary
Tom.
has been attending the Ukraine meetings, so
Oh, excellent.
he's jumped in with both
Already
feet.
plugged in, yeah. Good, okay, well, so on we go. Real quick review of the metrics, because I don't think there's anything really significant to call attention to here, except that there was really less than usual activity on the hub, I guess. Very few, in fact, no likes and no new topics. Now, I think that's because this is one of those things Ben was doing. So I guess, Sarah, maybe you haven't taken this on yet. We need someone to go through and actually add the topics to the posts, because people don't do that for themselves. So one of the things that
I do add topics to all posts.
well, you
So-
do. Well, why is this showing 0 topics there? Let me check that real quick, because I think I already had. No, I guess I don't. Let me go back to our metrics here, because I want to make sure that we get my Zoom window out of the way here. Hold on. All right, so let's look at last week. Topics. There it is too. Okay. Rick, what are you looking at? Because I'm seeing 2 topics and 18
Yeah, I don't
likes,
know.
and you're showing 0 and 0.
I must have, I wonder if,
7 posts.
I wonder if
showing 9.
what I'm doing is I accidentally did not put the start date.
Oh,
If I
maybe
just
you were
put the
looking at
end
a
date
different-
in, like, if I
Okay.
just hit the 10th.
All
I
right.
wonder what,
So, yeah,
maybe
make
that's what I
sure
did.
we always go from the previous Friday to the
Yeah.
Thursday just before today. So make sure you
It's the only
select
thing
that.
I can think of.
Okay. Yeah, that would make sense. All right, so we'll disregard those numbers. I guess the activity was more typical.
I will look into it, see if that's what I did. I don't know, maybe.
No big deal. If you would just update that in the spreadsheet maybe for that past week, so we have historical data. Number of active chapters we don't really know about, because we're still trying to work our way through that audit, and we already know the e-NABLE fund balance is getting down into the range where we need to start fundraising again. I actually didn't find any posts that I wanted to call attention to this week. There just wasn't really a lot of commenting or activity on posts this week. So does anybody have anything that you want to call attention to in terms of anything you saw in the hub? If not, we'll just move on. Okay, so as far as our recurring meetings go, I think the next one up is our chapter leaders meeting on Monday. And John, you're handling that, right?
I am, but it's being time shifted.
Okay.
I think to Thursday. Sarah, can you confirm that we've done that and update us on, has the calendar for the month gone out and is it aligned?
Well, so the calendar, the regular calendar still shows it on Monday.
So the calendar has not gone out. I wanted to make sure that we had a time set for Thursday that works for everyone. And then also for November 25th, the focus follow-up workshop, the presenters are listed as Ward Holloway and Andrew Kaiser. I followed up with both of them. Ward is unable to present, and I have not heard back from Andrew. So wondered
Those
if
are, I don't know where you got those names from, Sarah, but that's like a year old. Those guys haven't been, yeah,
okay.
that's not current.
They're on the calendar for this November 25th. So
Okay, I don't really know why that was. They've both been, I don't know about Ward, but Andrew has definitely kind of shifted his focus to his new full-time job. I don't think he's
Okay.
really been plugged in for quite some time.
okay.
So I don't think that's necessarily the plan. I'm the one that's supposed to have taken over the focus follow-up meetings as far as running them. And I was actually going to bring that up today because I don't have any good candidates for this month's presentation. I was going to ask what people thought. So I'm happy to, kind of host it, but
When is Thanksgiving?
well, that's the other thing. Thanksgiving is the day before. So I was going to ask if we even wanted to have that, Thanksgiving is
not.
the 24th, and then
Yeah, I think we should just let it go and divert to Thanksgiving weekend and
Maybe
not do it.
Give ourselves this month to figure out a new process for those. Okay, I tend to agree. So Sarah, let's take the focus follow-up workshop off the calendar for this month. Just cancel that if you will, and let people know that we'll regroup on that in December.
Okay.
Or maybe I don't want to say that because that's going to land right on Christmas probably, right? Well, maybe not. It's the 23rd. Maybe that's okay. I guess we could do that if we can find a presenter. Okay, but let's cancel this month's. Is there anything else that you need from us then, Sarah, in order to get November events done?
I don't think so.
Okay,
Um,
all right. So then you're saying that this week's chapter leader meeting, the one coming up, will not be on Monday. It will be on Thursday.
be on
most likely?
Thursday. Yeah.
Okay.
And let's just settle the time now.
Okay.
So is that going to be, let's see, is that the second Thursday of each month then that we're going to, or is that, no,
Well, this is just
actually
for
the
this-
third.
This is just for this week.
Okay,
And I can do I could do 12 or 1.
Okay. That works for me too.
okay.
And you'll let
Right.
everybody know. Let's get that calendar out before the month is over.
Okay.
All right, so let's move on. I want to dive right into our topics here because I want to make sure we have enough time. So let's talk a little bit about the Ukraine project and get an update from John. Are there any other time-sensitive things that we want to definitely have a little time to talk about today? Like Adam, do you have any updates for us that we want to go over before we get into the Lumio voting discussion?
Nothing really pressing. I've had a couple of meetings with the Helping Hands Project. I've had a little bit of trouble getting in contact with my folks in Kabul, but I'm hoping that the volunteer stepping in from the University of North Carolina, what is it, ECU? I'm going to be grabbing a couple of basically interns, it looks like, who are going to be assisting me with logistics there.
Nice.
Yeah, they've been incredibly helpful. We've been communicating on Slack, and yeah, they're excited to be a part of it. But I don't have any updates, but I did want to check with Sarah and anyone else if you could help me get in touch with the folks in Pakistan with Grit 3D, because that's really the big next step before we can commit, and then once that's in place, we can start getting a plan together to start printing and shipping.
I'm going to be in Rochester next week, so I'm happy to talk with Ben about that, and we
Okay.
can either I can follow up with you, or we can try to have a meeting.
Yeah, whatever's easier for you, no
Okay.
problem.
Okay.
Great. Okay, so John, why don't you update us on the Ukraine support project, or does it have a better name than that?
It doesn't.
Okay,
And I'm hereby christening splints for Ukraine until
Okay.
someone comes up with something better. So David Mazer and has done a really good job. His webpage is still being tweaked, but I think it's good to go. We have a press release, which is in your inbox this morning, which actually I need a number I can plug in for. e-NABLE has XX volunteers and chapters in YY countries or something like that, or has just how many countries are our volunteers and chapters in? I don't know how we answer it, but
I think Ben is the most likely to know a good answer for that.
right.
I feel like,
it's
didn't
just
we
an
have
estimate.
that in one of our annual, in our last annual report? Is that not one of the metrics he figured out?
It probably is now that you mention it.
Maybe look at the previous annual report, see if it's in there.
Okay. Sarah, can we put that on your plate? I'm going to be traveling a lot in the next few days. Just check the DORA report and plug in a number into the document that I sent this morning. And so that's sort of sitting just about ready to go.
Okay,
The website is ready to go. I think the addresses are rectified this week. Gary and several other people were going to try to follow the download and print instructions. And I haven't heard back as to whether they did. How about you, Gary?
Yeah, actually, I printed each of the braces. I've got
Okay.
the palm brace here, for example. And most of them went okay. There is a problem on my particular printer that I couldn't fit the dimensions of the brace that they're given. It's beyond 240 millimeters. So there's an issue there in my case, or anybody
Yeah.
that's got the Ender
Well, so
3.
correspond with David about that. It may just require an amendment to the FAQ about what to do if that arises. But talk to David about that. But we're getting down to the short strokes. At Thursday's meeting,
I'll talk to him on Monday at the meet, or Thursday in this case, the meeting.
Thursday. That's right.
But in any case, this one that I printed, I reduced the size. It was shown as 98%. I've reduced it to 83 and printed it, but
That's
I
not
don't know
good.
whether that would be satisfactory.
I mean, it
And
looks
did you
like they
print the
have a
label
number,
and
they have a number of different files in here. It looks like they got a finger brace, so you could certainly print things like that. Have you tried maybe the other files?
Yeah. Yes, there's 4 different ones altogether. I have the finger brace.
Okay, so there's only, it's just one that you're having trouble printing?
Yeah, just the one. The other 3,
Okay.
I didn't have any trouble.
Okay,
now there's a button on that web page that says make a printing label that you then take to the post office and send. Have you done that and tested that process?
Yes, I saw that.
Okay, but you haven't actually gone through the drill. Print
I'm
the
sorry.
label, take it to the post office, see what it's like, and then we see
No,
if it gets to
oh, okay,
the
I
right
thought
place.
this was some special program they had. They're literally just linking you over to USPS to create a label. Okay, I thought they'd worked
That's
out
right.
some special deal where they were going to give you a free label or something.
No.
Okay, so then you have to basically just create and pay for a label to ship it to where it needs to
Correct.
go.
Yeah.
Correct.
Okay. And then this
Okay,
is where
so
you're supposed to
anyway,
ship
I
it
would
to?
like to know that entire circuit works. So Gary, if you can just go through that, that would be great. I think there were a few other people who were going to do that. We'll compare notes at Thursday's chapter leaders meeting. We'll probably try to pull a trigger after Friday's town hall meeting 1 week from now. The press release will go out on the newswire, and then we have to figure out how to really rattle the cages within the e-NABLE community. And I think the answer to that, Sarah, is going to be a special email to everyone on our list, as well as social media posts in the hub and on social media. And then we see what happens.
Okay,
Okay, I'll look after the postal thing.
all right. Sounds like a fun project. I know I'll get my printers going on that. Okay, so I think we have time today to get back to our Lumio voting process discussion. If you recall, we were talking about the current process of voting on proposals and some of the criteria needing clarification. For example, let me just kind of go through these and refresh our memories on the talking points that we've gone through. So right now, the policy is that there needs to be 1 week of discussion and then at least 1 week of voting for each proposal. So it's supposed to go up as a discussion thread first. So we talked about maybe adjusting permissions within the Lumio platform so that people don't even have the ability to start a voting proposal, that we would have to, an admin would have to actually approve that or something along those lines. I don't know what is possible or what's supported, but that's one possible solution we talked about is, make it so people can only start a discussion thread. And then after it's run a week, we can flip the pull the trigger and go to a vote. Extensions of voting deadlines. We need to figure out what kind of rules to put on extensions. They shouldn't be limitless. You know, you shouldn't be able to just keep extending a deadline until you get the votes that you need to pass it. So, oh, and I think I said 1 week before. It says here 2 weeks. So I guess we talked about having a 2-week duration for voting with no extensions unless admins determine that's appropriate. So there might be a case where it is appropriate to extend, but that should be a discussion here. No changes to proposals within 48 hours of the closing deadline. We want to make sure people have a chance to comment and or change their vote. So we don't want anything to be changed right at the last minute after people have already cast a vote for what they understood the proposal to be. So we talked about having a proposal kind of locked for the last 48 hours. We also talked about maybe having a rule to say no voting on your own proposals. We never really decided one way or the other on that, but you know, obviously, if somebody is going to vote on their own proposal, they're going to vote in favor. So it seems like it kind of skews things. I personally would like to say it's probably best to say we don't vote on our own proposals, but that's something that's up for discussion. And another thing that we've seen is people going out to recruit sort of non-active e-NABLE people. So just going and recruiting friends and people on social media to say, hey, please come and vote on my proposal, help me get this passed. And they try to get people to come in just to vote, even if those people really aren't plugged into the e-NABLE community. And so we want to kind of think about what are the rules of who can get involved in this voting process and under what circumstances, and when should they get involved? You know, should they have, you know, had to introduce themselves at least or something like that? We have to kind of talk about, you know, what do you need to have in order to qualify to participate in the voting process? And so we started to talk about maybe, you know, you have to have at least joined the hub because that shows that you're probably at least interested in being part of what we're doing. Maybe posting an introduction about yourself. And then we said other. So those are really the two things that we had talked about. Maybe if you've done those two things, at least we have a good indication that you're probably serious about being involved. And at that point, you're probably, you know, it's probably very appropriate that you're voting on proposals in Lumio. And then this is perhaps the most important aspect, the calculations for a passing vote. So to review, our current rules are this: each project proposal must receive at least 15 agree votes with at least 80% of the total votes in support of the project in order to be approved. Okay, so that part's clear enough. You got to have at least 18 agree votes. So if there just weren't enough votes, if you only had 10 total votes, it's not going to pass. You need to have at least 15 agree votes, and at least 80% of the total needs to be agree. So if you have 15 agree and, you know, 5 disagree, it doesn't pass because that's not 80%. So it needs to be 80% of the total votes. But here's the catch. The wording currently is, for determining the approval percentage, abstain votes are not counted in the total at all. So if you have, you know, if you've got 15 agree votes and you've got, you know, maybe 10 people that voted abstain because they were a little hesitant but not quite sure which way to go, those votes get ignored. They don't count in the total at all. And that vote would pass. And we actually had a challenge with that not too long back. And so we think we need to adjust the wording on this. So we started talking about proposed rules. There's a few options here. And I think we already ruled out option 1, but I'll just cover it anyway. We talked about a scoring system. Each agree vote counts as a +1, each abstain vote counts as a -1, and each disagree vote counts as a -2. And the reasoning behind that was that when people abstain from a vote, it really seems like it's usually a way of expressing that they have some hesitancy, that they're not quite convinced that it should be supported, but they're not ready to say flat out no. And so we thought that should probably count against, you know, as a minus against the total. But a disagree is somebody that feels strongly enough to kind of put their foot down and say, no, I don't think this should go. And so the proposal was to make that a -2. But like I said, we already talked, and the discussion was that it probably doesn't make sense to have you know, some votes count as more than others. So we kind of ruled that option out. Option 2 was each project proposal must have at least 15 agree votes and at least 80% of the total votes in support of the project. Abstain votes and disagree votes would be treated the same. So if you have 15 agree votes and you've got, you know, a few abstain and a few disagree, those get added together for the total. And it's a question of whether the agree votes are 80% of the total. Option 3 Each project proposal must have at least 20 total votes, not agree votes, total votes, with at least 80% of the total votes in support of the project in order to be approved. 10% or more disagree votes would require discussion in a town hall meeting. Now, it's a little bit more of a confusing kind of a rule, I guess, but if memory serves correctly, this was the one that I think we were kind of zeroing in on in our last discussion, is the one that people seem to be favoring. And then the last point to talk about is how a block vote is handled, because there is the ability to vote 4 ways in Lumia. You can vote agree, abstain, disagree, or block. Now, I don't think anybody's ever used block, but if somebody votes block, what does that mean? How does it get handled? I think in the past we've said that it just requires a discussion in the town hall meeting before it can go further. So with that, let me open it back up for discussion here. What do you guys think? Maybe we should start with this part here. Would you guys agree that of these 3 options, that third one is the one that's of greatest interest?
Yeah, I'm not, I'm abstaining on that question until we discuss it a little bit further.
Okay, fair enough.
It does seem to me that, first of all, there are a lot of ways to respond to a vote. You didn't mention the dominant response, which is no response at all.
That's true.
It seems to me that abstaining is more meaningful than not voting. And I think it does indicate lack of support.
Well, that was my thinking.
Even though it may not mean opposition.
That was my thinking when I put this sort of scoring approach together. It was Adam that made the point that there was something that just didn't sit quite right about the idea of an agree vote counting as 1, but a disagree vote counting as a -2, and waiting.
Well, I think conceptually a disagree should have the same weight as an agree.
Okay.
And I think an abstain should perhaps have 0.5 negative.
Okay.
So that
Okay, so a -0.5 on the abstain. That's an interesting way of approaching it. So then each agree would count as a +1, disagree would count as a -1, and abstain would count as a -0.5. And then we would just have to come up with a net total of whatever points you need to pass.
I think that this is rehashing the conversation we had about this last time by bringing up this point. But
Yes.
And apologies if we're just circling the drain. But my thought is that abstaining shouldn't count against this numerically, except to increase the denominator to raise the threshold for that the total number of positive votes is required. I think that's the extent to which an abstained vote should take away from a total tally. I think reducing the numerator in that way, I don't know, it just feels a little weird.
I think that's a great point.
Yeah, and that kind of points us back to this third option where everything counts towards the total, and we're just looking for, we've got 2 metrics. We've got a percentage of the total votes we need in support, and we've got a maximum percentage that can be opposed.
I think not voting at all says that you are, kind of keeping your hands out of it. I think by indicating that you're quote unquote abstaining says that you're not convinced, but you're not opposed to it. So you're raising the threshold a little bit to get more support from the rest of the community without taking away from the potential.
So then in this third scenario, like you said, those abstain votes are going to increase the total. And so it makes it harder to achieve the 80% that you need in support.
Correct.
But they don't contribute towards the percentage of disagree. So it's not gonna affect, something failing due to this point. Only the disagree votes count towards that 10% limit there, right?
Right.
Yeah, that makes, I like
that.
Yeah,
I do too. So let's just work with that for a minute.
Okay.
The catch is that these formulas, et cetera, are really sort of hard to wrap your head around. I think
Yes.
it might be useful to try to come up with a phrase for each option that captures the spirit of what we're doing. So obviously a vote for is, I am in favor of this going through. A vote against is, I think this should not go through. Abstain, this is the hard one, is something like, I'm not sure, but if there's enough support for it, I'm satisfied.
Mm,
And then enough support captures
yeah.
the notion.
Yeah, I see where you're going with that. I think something more along the lines of just saying not oppose is really what you're saying, because it's not saying that you want to stay out of it entirely, but it is saying that you want to you know, you are not convinced of the validity of the proposal. I don't know. I mean, I've never been involved in or read up on any of the theory of how these kinds of organizations come to democratic decisions in this way. I could be completely off base here, but
you're doing fine, Adam. And as someone who has looked at the literature, the mathematicians report that there is no perfect voting system.
yeah, that's
so. So let's, if you don't mind, go back to this magic phrase we're looking for. You could say not opposed, but it equally means not in favor. So I think
Well, I mean, I think we need to let those labels, you know, the agree, abstain, disagree, et cetera, sort of speak for themselves, because people aren't very good at following definitions anyway. They're gonna, you know, they're gonna look at the word and take it for what they think it means anyway. I think the scoring rules are what need to sort of impose the meaning, right? So that's why
okay, so then let's hear the clearest statement possible of our emerging consensus scoring rule.
Okay, so need at least 20 votes, at least 80%.
What kind of?
No, at least 20
any
votes.
sort?
Any sort, at
Of
least
any
20
sort.
votes. At least 80% of those votes need to be in support, agree. And no more than 10% can be disagree. That's it.
Okay, and then there's a okay, that is
The
it.
abstain thing just works itself into that equation, because you got to have 80%, you know, agree and no more than 10% disagree, so that it handles itself.
Okay, I'm good with that.
Okay. So remember, guys, I just want to remind us that we're not making any decisions here, and we're not changing any rules. That's not we don't have any authority to do this. All we're deciding on here is what we like, and that's what we're going to put forward as a discussion on Lumio to let the community comment on and eventually vote on. So the community will decide whether or not we go in this direction, but we're just trying to decide what we want to put forward as a suggestion here.
Right.
Where do we put our thumb on the scale?
Where do we what?
Well,
where do we put our thumb on the scale?
Right.
So I think that's fine. And, you know, we'll of course do this according to the old rules. Hopefully the resolution, which may be modified by virtue of discussion, will pass according to both the old and the new rules, which happens when you're, you know, when you've got widespread support.
Yeah. And then for the block, I would just say, unless anyone disagrees, I'd say anybody can vote to block. And if even one person votes to block, then the voting cannot be closed until we have a discussion in this group. And of course, that person that voted block is expected to attend that discussion. But we would essentially put the voting on pause. So if somebody votes block on, say, you know, a Wednesday, and the voting is supposed to conclude on Thursday, we'd want to extend it so that we can have that discussion on our Friday town hall before it concludes, right?
Okay, what happens if the blocker doesn't show up?
I guess at that point we would void the vote. I mean, if you don't show up for the discussion, then your vote gets canceled, I guess, right?
Okay, conceivably the blocker could say, I can't make this Friday, but I could make next Friday.
Yeah, it would be reasonable.
Within our discretion.
Yeah.
Okay. Okay.
So anyone.
All right, so let's work our way backwards up the list, if you will, since we've, I think, converged on that last most complicated item.
Okay. If Okay. So how do we feel about putting this forward as a proposal, folks? I think what we're well, I guess we're not done. So I think we've come to a more or less an agreement on the calculation, which we just talked about, so I won't go through it again. And I think we've come to an agreement on how to handle block votes. But now we need to go back to talk about these other points. I don't think there's really any kind of debate on the discussion process. That seems to be working. Is everyone still happy with requiring at least a 1-week discussion period prior to voting? I haven't heard anyone being opposed to that.
I only have an issue with one of these items, and this is
Is
about
that
it.
this one?
Which one?
Is that the one about adjusting permissions so only admins can start a voting proposal?
No, I think that's reasonable.
Okay. So that one, we just need to see if that's possible. John, do you know if that's a limitation we can impose?
I don't. It's been years since I looked at their dashboard.
Okay. Do you want to look at that for us? Or do you want me to? See if I can figure it out.
Jeremy, I want you to. I think you're better at this.
Okay. Just make a note of this here. All right, and then, okay, so discussion, I think it sounds like everyone's okay with. We're still gonna have a 1-week discussion period. We're gonna see if we can, enforce that by preventing people from starting a vote themselves, but either way, whether it's by policy or by that kind of control, we'll stick with the 1-week discussion period prior to a vote. Extension of voting deadlines. So we have a note here that voting should be for 2 weeks with no extensions unless, I guess, this team here determines that it's appropriate to have an extension, and no changes to proposals within 48 hours of the closing deadline. So how do you guys feel about these?
The problem with 2 weeks is that it slows the process down a lot.
So what do we have now? Is it 1 week currently as our guideline?
I think so.
Is it? Okay. So are we okay with 1 week voting, or I don't know, what do you guys think? Do we let people decide voting should be for 1 to 2 weeks and let the proposer decide what they want to do?
You know what? Let's make it 10 days, which means it will overlap 2 town hall meetings.
So do we want to say it should be 10 days period, or it should be no more than 10 days? Like what, how do we want to, how rigid do we want to be on the voting period?
I think let's leave it simple. Let's say 10 days, but let's also make it explicit that someone, and I guess it's the community coordinating committee, can make adjustments to these rules under some circumstances, or when unforeseen contingencies arise.
I hear what you're saying, yeah. I'm not gonna, I think what we'll do is we'll put that as kind of a more general thing that, any of these rules can be amended or adjusted, as needed by a discussion. But otherwise, so John says 10 days for voting. Any other one have thoughts on this? And what about the limitation on no changes within 48 hours of the close?
Are we saying 10 business days or 10 calendar days?
No, he's saying calendar days.
I meant calendar days. And I don't have a problem with the second bullet. I think that's a good idea.
Anyone else have an opinion on these? Sarah, you're not just here to take notes. Feel free to speak up. Your opinion matters.
I don't know that I've been in the space long enough to, I don't.
No, I understand. It's a unique process.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Okay, well, feel free to ask questions.
Yeah, just feel free to chime in anytime. Rick, have you ever used the Lumio process for anything?
Once. I only voted one time. And I have to be honest with you, I didn't know what I was doing. I came into the thing because I was invited. And I read through everything, and it wasn't entirely clear to me that I was doing it correctly.
Okay, all right.
And I think I later regretted my vote.
No problem. No problem. Okay, so does it sounds like we have a comfort level on these points. Should we move on? Are we going to say 10 calendar days for voting and no changes
Sure.
within the last 48 hours?
Sure.
Okay. How do we feel about not voting on your own proposals? Is it worth making that a rule? I mean, we're talking about one vote, so I don't know if it's critical, but
No, I think that's reasonable. And
Okay.
you know, I don't know if we need to. I don't know if there needs to be anything inbuilt to prevent that, or even if that can be done in the system.
I think
but-
as long as we have it written somewhere. I mean, to be honest, in all the proposals I've ever seen, I think this has only happened once or twice that I can recall that somebody did vote on their own. So I think it's kind of generally understood that you just don't do that, but I think it would be best to just have it in the policy.
Yeah.
That way, in
The
case
only-
it does happen, we can, cancel that vote or whatever.
The only quirk I can think of is if you have multiple people, this is going to drive single applicant proposals.
Yeah, you don't want to get a team of 10 people together on a project because then none of them can vote. I see your
That's also a problem we haven't had.
Huh. That's a really good point. I hadn't thought of that. I mean, maybe I think we cross that bridge when we come to it.
or maybe we say the lead proposal
Right.
author doesn't get to vote.
That's I think that's exactly what it'd be. The problem is that we don't have a defined process for submitting proposals. So we have to sort of arbitrarily create a rule whole cloth.
Okay.
But yeah, lead author or lead submitter can't vote. But yeah, that's interesting.
Okay. I think that'll take care of that if we just phrase it that way. Okay, and then how about recruiting people from outside e-NABLE to vote on proposals? And with this next piece here, I think we kind of were putting this forward as a way of dealing with that
That's right.
challenge. Okay, so the idea here is if we say, in order to participate in our Lumio voting process, maybe we say you need to have these two badges. You need to have had the joined the hub badge, and you need to have the introduced self badge. Those are two badges that we already have established. It already gives, somebody like Rick a chance to verify that, yes, this person has, introduced themselves, and, that badge gets awarded. So that would be one way, John.
So suppose they do both of those things the day of voting. I think that's a red flag. I think we need some lag.
But at the same time, we talked about this last time, if somebody does put together a proposal and then goes and sort of finds people that are passionate about what they want to do and brings them into the community specifically to help with that project, we don't want to discourage that, right? We want, if they really want to get involved, and we want them to come in.
This is the one that I had a problem with.
Yeah.
Because
we just don't want people.
Yeah, engagement is our number one problem for where I stand. And this is a bar to engagement based on something that has happened one time. I think that if this becomes a recurring problem, we get a little bit more draconian. But as it stands, we need to open things up. We don't need to close things off right now.
So maybe this is best handled with some softer language instead of taking it from a rule point of view. Maybe we just have a statement somewhere in our language where we're laying out these rules that, look, you're voting on fund allocation for our community. If you're voting, we kind of expect you to be participating in the community. So don't just vote and then disappear, something to that effect. If we just say that, I think.
I think, that will be meaningful to all the people we don't need to communicate with, and will not be a deterrent to the people we're worried about who might be trying to game the system.
Okay.
So
You have a better idea?
About setting hurdles in place, I think that a fair one would be granting access to Lumio upon receipt of the 2 badges that Jeremy mentioned. If that's something that can be gate kept on the back end.
Now that's an interesting idea. I've never thought about that before. Right now, people have to kind of find their way themselves to the Lumio platform and the voting process, and they have to sign up and all that. I like that idea of when they've achieved certain badges, we send them an email saying, hey, congratulations, you've now achieved this milestone. We now would like to invite you to join into this process and help us make important decisions. I kind of like that approach. Because
automating it to a
people,
degree,
I think we'd actually get more people participating if we are directly inviting them like that.
Yep.
I agree. We might also extend that to people who've joined in the last 6 months or something, just to beef up the system.
Of course.
So that's fine. That's also an opportunity for there to be a subtle procedural lag in the process.
Well, I was just thinking that might be a discussion to have with MASV, because there's probably a fairly easy way of tying into the badge authorization platform he's already built, where once this happens and this happens, then it would trigger an email based on this template. It could probably be automated. Whether he has time.
I don't think I have
right
any
now,
badges.
I don't know.
Do I have any badges?
Well, Adam, that's because
Well,
you are a slouch.
the only reason I say badges, Adam, is because we already have a process for the badges, and it gives us a trigger point, like, because it does let you automate it. Whereas without tying it to a badge, it becomes a manual human process. Somebody has to track it and do it. I'm just saying the badges give you an automated mechanism that as soon as this badge is issued, you could have it automatically trigger this email to invite them to this process.
Oh, I need to sync with Badger. I remember that. I got that when I first joined.
That's right. I have a feeling you are badged, Adam, but
Oh, sure.
I'll tell you in a minute.
I mean, because as soon as you set up an account on the hub, you get awarded your first badge automatically. So you at least have one badge. Okay, so where were we? So we're kind of it sounds like we're leaning towards not imposing rules for people joining, but maybe extending an invite to them specifically after they've achieved certain badges. So what if somebody finds their way to Lumio before they've reached that point? They don't yet have those badges. They just go and sign up for Lumio. Are we saying we don't let them in until they've gotten these 2 badges?
I'm just thinking about the administrative overhead.
Me too, because that's you and I mostly, John. We'd have to, when we see those applications to Lumia, we'd have to then go and log into the hub and go to the badging space and see if they've earned those 2 badges. And yeah, there's some overhead in that.
I wouldn't be surprised, Jeremy, though, if one can configure Lumio so that it's an invite-only thing.
Okay.
And then the invites could go out automatically as per MASV. So
all right, let me put that up here with mine.
Nominate Jeremy to just do a little background research on what our options are.
Jeremy, you lucky dog.
Exactly.
All right, see what we can do. I'll try to look into
Team,
that
I've got to
next time.
bounce, but thank you.
Yeah,
nice to
thanks,
talk to
Adam.
you all again.
We're gonna have to wrap here anyway. You won't miss anything.
All right, have a good day. Bye. Oh, and actually, Thunder Going is tomorrow. I'll let you know. You guys know how it
Yes,
goes.
enjoy.
Oh,
All
have
right.
fun. Take
Thank you.
pictures.
I will. All right, bye.
Okay, so we got to wrap here. I think the question is, do we have enough of a sort of a common understanding for us to maybe write this up for the discussion component, at least, if not voting now on Lumio? Or do we?
Yeah, I think you should do your research, and then
that's a fair point.
maybe you and I can, based on what you've learned, draft for discussion.
Okay. Let me go ahead and put that on here. We won't do it until after these things, but I'll say Jeremy and John draft Lumio discussion thread about new proposed voting rule or guidelines. Okay. Sounds good. I think we got to wrap. Anyone have anything real quick before we do?
Jeremy, it was very good of you to preserve those notes and to lead this discussion. I think we finally made some progress here, and I appreciate
do
it.
too. Yeah, I do
And
too.
no deed going unpunished. Thank you for doing that research on Lumia.
You got it. All right, I'll see
See
you
you
next
guys.
week.